One moment, Seo is living an ordinary life. The next, he finds himself standing in the middle of a raging battlefield without the slightest clue what is happening. Before he can understand the situation, a masked man steps directly in front of him and demands to know who the hell he is. Seo immediately panics. He has no idea how he ended up in the middle of such a chaotic fight. Only a short while earlier, he had been drinking with his friend, Kim Shin. Without warning, Kim Shin asks Seo what he believes is the strongest selling point of his newest novel. Seo lets out a tired sigh and remarks that his friend has started complaining again. Kim Shin dramatically collapses face first onto the table and continues grumbling while Seo advises him not to become discouraged over one unsuccessful project. Kim Shin suddenly slams his hand against the table and exclaims that it was far worse than a simple failure. The sudden outburst catches Seo by surprise. After all, he is Kim Shin's only devoted reader, having finished every novel his friend has ever written. The two only became drinking companions because Kim Shin had named the protagonist of his latest web novel after Seo. Speaking honestly as a reader, Seo admits that the writing is strong and the world building is incredibly detailed. However, he points out that the title and tropes are painfully generic, making the entire novel resemble a cheap imitation. Kim Shin sighs and acknowledges that Seo is correct. He explains that this is precisely why he wanted his opinion before looking at him with an unusually serious expression. He asks what Seo would change if he were allowed to alter only one thing. Seo laughs and remarks that he would already be rich if he knew the perfect answer. After considering it briefly, he says that the first thing he would remove is the cliched status window used in nearly every story. He adds that, were it his own novel, he would also include plenty of top-tier waifus because a good tsundere could supposedly fix anything. Laughing, Seo asks whether Kim Shin has fallen into writer's block. Rather than answering, Kim Shin begins considering the suggestion with complete seriousness. He observes that without a status window, the protagonist would no longer be restricted by the system. Seo is impressed by how quickly his friend develops the concept, but he tells Kim Shin not to take a casual joke so seriously. The moment those words leave him, a strange sensation spreads through his body. His eyelids suddenly become unbearably heavy, and the beer can slips from his fingers before striking the floor. Kim Shin calls Seo's name as he staggers out of his chair and collapses. Alarmed, Kim Shin quickly moves over to examine him while Seo's vision steadily blurs. Just before darkness consumes everything, Seo sees Kim Shin standing above him with an unsettling smile. His friend calmly asks what the problem is. Everything fades into blackness. Seo suddenly opens his eyes. A vicious headache nearly sends him falling backward again. Confused, he wonders how the hell he managed to return home. He immediately walks to the refrigerator and gulps down some water. Still feeling absolutely miserable, he heads to a nearby convenience store to purchase hangover medicine. After scanning the item, the cashier informs him that the total comes to roughly $4. Seo reaches for his wallet, only to realize that he left the damn thing behind. While he stands there without any money, he notices the cashier staring at him as though she has been completely captivated. Feeling uncomfortable, he asks whether something is wrong. The girl blushes and says that nothing is wrong before admitting that he is incredibly handsome. Seo is completely stunned. No one has ever said anything like that to him before. Embarrassed, he thanks her, but she then asks whether he intends to pay through status pay. Seo repeats the strange phrase in confusion. He has no idea what she means and begins wondering whether he might still be drunk. Since he has no money regardless, he apologizes, promises to return later, and hurriedly exits the store. Still thinking about the cashier's words, he approaches a parked car and examines his reflection in the side mirror. The instant he sees his face, shock surges through him. He quickly pulls the mirror closer. Ash-brown hair, sharply defined double eyelids, and a flawlessly sculpted jawline stare back at him. Seo's heart skips because the face in the reflection belongs to the protagonist of Kim Shin's novel. Remaining crouched beside the car, Seo studies his unfamiliar appearance. He reluctantly admits that his new face is ridiculously attractive. Still believing that the entire experience must be some bizarre dream, he clenches his fist and punches himself directly in the face. A sharp burst of pain shoots through his jaw. Seo curses and confirms that this is definitely not a dream. Before he can process anything further, a deep rumbling noise causes him to look upward. His eyes gradually widen. An unimaginably enormous tree towers over the modern city, its colossal branches stretching far beyond the skyscrapers of Seoul. Seo freezes and realizes that it is the World Tree. It is exactly the same tree described in Kim Shin's novel. As though the situation is not already insane enough, Seo overhears two children excitedly speaking nearby. They discuss being accepted into the superhuman academy so they can eventually become mighty warriors. One of the boys suddenly shouts for his status window to appear. A glowing screen instantly materializes before him. The child then raises his hand and commands his inventory to open. Another interface appears, and he orders his primary weapon to be equipped. A spiked club immediately forms in his grasp. The boy proudly swings it around and declares that he will become the greatest weapon master in the world. His friend bursts into laughter and mocks him, saying that such a cheap E-rank weapon probably could not even kill a pigeon. The boy's confidence instantly collapses. With tears forming in his eyes, he explains that his grandmother bought it for him and promised that it would help him become an incredible superhuman. Feeling guilty, the other child immediately tries to retract his insult and begins praising the weapon instead. However, the boy is already furious. He tells his friend to forget it and hurls the club with all his strength. Everyone nearby watches as it spins through the air. With a heavy smack, the weapon strikes a passing pigeon perfectly. Both boys stare at the result in utter disbelief. After witnessing the entire scene, Seo finally accepts the truth. He is genuinely inside the novel. More specifically, he is living as the story's protagonist. At that moment, a woman nearby calls for the children to hurry before they miss the World Tree Festival. Seo's eyes immediately brighten. He realizes that if the festival is taking place today, then he has arrived at the very beginning of the story. That also means he has not yet awakened the protagonist's hidden S-rank status window. His heart begins pounding faster. Taking a deep breath, Seo closes his eyes and forces himself to remain calm. He reasons that if he follows the original storyline exactly, every event should unfold as he remembers. A short while later, Seo reaches the festival grounds. The enormous world tree rises proudly from the center of the plaza, decorated from its roots to its towering branches for the celebration. The entire area is crowded with visitors enjoying the festivities. As Seo stares at the massive tree, he remembers that this is the exact moment when the protagonist is supposed to awaken an absurdly powerful S-rank status window. While he is absorbed in thought, an elderly woman operating a pastry stall waves him over. She warmly remarks that he is quite a handsome young man. Seo responds with an awkward smile. The kind old woman offers him a freshly baked piece of bread made with leaves from the world tree. The warm, sweet aroma is impossible to resist, so Seo accepts it with a bashful expression. He hesitantly asks how much it costs. The woman kindly explains that a package of 4 costs slightly less than $2. Seo's smile immediately vanishes. He suddenly remembers that he is completely broke. The elderly woman notices his troubled expression and gently assures him that there is no problem. She tells him that he can simply pay through his status window. Seo laughs nervously and says that he is currently out of money. He cannot exactly admit that he does not possess a status window at all. Seo says that he will return later and attempts to hand the bread back, but the woman simply presses the bag into his hands. She tells him not to worry about the price and insists that he keep it. Seo tries to refuse, explaining that he genuinely cannot accept it, but the woman interrupts him with another gentle smile. She assures him that everything is fine and encourages him to eat without concern. She then softly pats him on the back and says that he reminds her of her son. Seo is sincerely moved. For the first time since entering this absurd world, a genuine smile appears on his face. He begins thinking that perhaps living in this place will not be so terrible after all. As Seo walks away, the old woman quietly wipes the sweat from her forehead. She feels deeply sorry for him, believing that the poor young man cannot even afford a $2 snack. Meanwhile, Seo locates an empty bench near the plaza's center. The gigantic world tree towers above the entire festival as he takes his first bite of the bread. The instant the creamy filling melts across his tongue, his eyes widen. Seo mentally exclaims that it tastes unbelievably good. The soft pastry and rich cream are unlike anything he has ever eaten. As he continues enjoying the bread, an absurd thought enters his mind. Perhaps he should abandon all the dangerous responsibilities of being the protagonist and spend the rest of his life peacefully enjoying this new world. Just then, he notices 3 teenagers walking together through the crowd. The moment Seo sees them, his expression becomes serious. He stops eating and quietly fixes his gaze on the group. Seo recognizes all 3 immediately. They are not ordinary festival visitors. They are some of the novel's central characters. The girl with bright blue hair is Hai, an energetic young woman who remains cheerful regardless of the circumstances. Walking beside her is Kim Cha-jin, a brown-haired boy wearing a headband and displaying his familiar sarcastic grin. The final member is Choi Jae-hoon, a tall and elegantly dressed young man with a piercing gaze and the composed presence of a natural leader. Seo can hardly believe how accurately they match the novel. Every feature perfectly corresponds with Kim Shin's descriptions. For a moment, Seo considers approaching and introducing himself, but quickly decides against it. According to the original plot, they are not supposed to meet until after the disaster at the festival. Then Seo's face abruptly loses all color. A nearly forgotten detail from the novel crashes back into his memory. His breathing becomes unstable as he realizes exactly what is about to happen. This festival is the incident responsible for awakening the protagonist's hidden S-rank abilities. Seo curses under his breath. Before he can respond, a massive explosion erupts behind him. The blast rips through the festival and flames immediately spread across the plaza. People scream in terror as chaos consumes the crowd. Seo remains frozen. He had completely forgotten about the terrorist attack. All the excitement he felt about entering a fantasy world disappears in an instant. Reality finally strikes him. He is no longer reading the story from the safety of his home. He is living inside it. And if he dies here, he will not receive another opportunity. The first major tragedy of the novel has officially begun. Far above the burning festival, a sinister laugh echoes through the sky. A mysterious villain hovers overhead on an advanced flying platform. Looking down upon the terrified civilians, he ridicules them. He declares that the pathetic insects below have become weak after enjoying such a long period of peace. He then announces that their day of judgment has finally arrived. The man wears unusual red goggles and a sophisticated purple combat suit, giving him an even more threatening appearance. Seo recognizes him immediately. He is the inventor, the most dangerous bastard in the entire novel. He is also the mastermind responsible for the massacre taking place around them. The inventor observes the panicking crowd with clear amusement, laughing as the destruction spreads below. Suddenly, Choi Ji-hoon charges over and forcefully shoves Seo forward. Ji-hoon tells him to stop standing around like an idiot and orders him to run. Without wasting another moment, Ji-hoon assumes control of the situation. He commands everyone nearby to evacuate while helping the wounded civilians scattered across the ground. Seo finally forces his legs to move. His heart pounds violently inside his chest as he runs. Only minutes earlier, being reincarnated into a novel had seemed exciting. Now, it has become a complete fucking nightmare. Behind him, the gigantic world tree is slowly swallowed by flames while the inventor continues laughing from the sky. Seo finally understands the difference. Reading about a terrorist attack is one thing, actually experiencing one is something else entirely. As he searches desperately for an escape route, Seo notices one of the hunters opening his status window. The man immediately accesses his inventory and equips a glowing blue gauntlet known as the Aquamarine Embrace. Staring toward the airborne villain, the hunter expresses disbelief that anyone would dare attack innocent civilians in the middle of the city. Without hesitating, the hunter raises his arm and fires a devastating wave of blue magic into the sky. Moments later, several elite heroes belonging to renowned guilds arrive to confront the inventor. However, the villain does not appear concerned in the slightest. He merely watches them approach with a taunting smile. One of the S-rank hunters confidently declares that the villain must have a death wish if he truly believes he can attack innocent civilians and leave the city alive. Another hero shouts for everyone below to continue evacuating, assuring the crowd that they will end the battle quickly. Seo's expression only grows darker. He remembers an important detail that everyone else has overlooked. The civilians were never the inventor's true objective. The villain suddenly bursts into laughter once again. He mockingly asks whether the heroes genuinely believe he came all this way merely to slaughter a few helpless citizens. A sinister glow appears behind his red goggles as he slowly raises a small metallic device. He reveals that every hunter gathered before him is his actual target. Then he presses the button. A beam of dark crimson energy immediately shoots into the sky. Within seconds, the energy expands into an enormous sphere hovering above the battlefield. Realizing that something is terribly wrong, one of the female hunters activates her fire ability and launches an attack before the villain can proceed. However, before her spell reaches him, something impossible occurs. The entire system suddenly begins to glitch. Her flames vanish instantly. At the same moment, every hunter across the battlefield collapses to their knees. Disbelief fills their faces. No matter how desperately they try, none of them can summon their status windows. Their abilities have completely disappeared. Fear sweeps through the festival in an instant. Watching humanity's strongest heroes become utterly helpless, the inventor begins laughing uncontrollably. He looks down upon them with absolute contempt. He calls them fools and says that they have spent their entire lives depending on power that never truly belonged to them. The villain proudly presents his greatest creation, the status disruptor, and commands everyone to kneel before its magnificence. According to him, he has successfully decoded the system itself. He claims his invention will finally free humanity from the tyranny of statistics and allow people to return to relying entirely on their natural physical strength. A colossal crimson shockwave spreads through the festival, completely blanketing the surrounding area. With every hunter stripped of their powers, the inventor looks down at them with a cruel grin. He asks how it feels to discover that their strength was never truly their own. He grabs an injured female hunter by the face and violently demands an answer. Meanwhile, Seo remains hidden behind a nearby wall. He remembers that this is the exact point in the original novel when the protagonist, the only person who does not rely on a status window, is supposed to step forward. When no one responds, the inventor casually throws several metallic grenades toward the fallen hunters. A second later, the explosives detonate. The helpless heroes are wiped out without mercy. The civilians watching from a distance stare in horror at the villain's brutality. Seo's entire body trembles as he witnesses the massacre. Only now does he fully comprehend how terrifying the situation truly is. He curls himself behind cover and presses one hand over his mouth, desperately trying to remain silent. His body shakes uncontrollably. For the first time, Seo understands that he could genuinely die here. He is not the brave and fearless hero described in a novel. He is merely an ordinary man trapped inside one. One of the surviving hunters desperately pleads for his life, explaining that he has a fiancée waiting for him at home. The inventor shows no sympathy. He slowly approaches the helpless man while extending his razor-sharp metallic claws. At that moment, Choi Ji-hoon suddenly charges through the smoke. Using every ounce of strength he possesses, he swings his enormous greatsword directly toward the villain's back. The surviving hunter watches in complete disbelief as Jae-hoon rushes forward without hesitation. However, the strike never lands. The inventor stops the massive blade using nothing but his leg. He then kicks Jae-hoon away with overwhelming force. Instead of becoming angry, the villain looks impressed. He praises Jae-hoon for being able to swing such a heavy weapon even without the assistance of a status window. The inventor then slowly approaches the wounded young man. He states that Jae-hoon will make an excellent experimental subject. Calmly, the villain announces that he intends to bring Ji-hoon back to his laboratory and use him for research. Watching the situation unfold, Seo grabs his head in panic. He knows that he is supposed to awaken his power at this exact moment. However, no matter how desperately he tries, nothing happens. Fear completely overwhelms him. Seo turns away and begins running. He convinces himself that he was never capable of becoming the hero of this story. As he desperately flees, he repeatedly assures himself that everything will somehow resolve itself without his involvement. Perhaps the original plot will correct its course. Perhaps someone else will intervene. Perhaps this entire nightmare is nothing more than a horrifying illusion. Then Seo suddenly stops. A motionless body lies on the ground directly in front of him. It belongs to the kind elderly woman who gave him free bread earlier. Her freshly baked pastries are scattered across the muddy ground beside her. Seo stares at the heartbreaking sight in complete silence. His chest tightens. Sadness and rage surge through him at the same time. At that moment, he realizes that he cannot simply walk away. Outside the barrier surrounding the festival, government officials frantically attempt to determine what kind of energy has sealed the entire area. A female guild leader becomes increasingly desperate after learning that her teammates remain trapped inside. Her assistant attempts to reassure her, insisting that their hunters are powerful enough to defeat whoever launched the attack. Neither of them understands what is truly happening beyond the barrier. Back at the center of the battlefield, the inventor pins Ji-hoon against the ground. He grabs him by the head and repeats that he is taking him back to his private laboratory. The villain even jokes that he may cut open Ji-hoon's brain so he can examine him more carefully. At that moment, a firm hand closes around the hilt of the giant sword resting on the stone pavement. Seo steps out from the smoke. Dragging the enormous, glowing greatsword behind him, he walks directly toward the inventor. The villain immediately notices him and turns around. Without saying a word, Seo swings the massive blade with all the strength he can gather. The inventor barely avoids the strike at the final possible moment. Seo clenches his teeth in frustration after missing his first attack. Hovering above the ground on his platform, the inventor stares at him in disbelief. He demands to know how Seo is still capable of moving. His eyes narrow as he questions why the status disruptor failed to affect him. The inventor glares at Seo through his glowing red goggles and angrily demands to know who the hell the strange young man is. Meanwhile, Seo curses himself internally. He thinks that he should have ended the fight with that first strike. Sweat begins pouring down his face as the reality of his situation settles in. If the battle continues, he will be the one who dies. The inventor briefly wonders whether Seo possesses an ancient relic capable of shielding him from the status disruptor. However, he immediately dismisses the possibility, believing that such a thing should be impossible. Red sparks begin crackling around the villain's hands as a twisted grin spreads across his face. He declares that Seo is a far more valuable specimen than he initially assumed. Nearby, the injured warrior watches the confrontation while barely managing to remain conscious. He is completely stunned. He wonders who Seo is and how he can move as though the disruption never occurred. Even more confusing is Seo's awkward and inexperienced stance, yet he is somehow managing to survive against the villain. The warrior cannot understand how such a thing is possible. He is also shocked to see Seo carrying the black iron greatsword, a weapon that normally requires an absurd A-rank strength stat merely to lift. Without warning, the inventor lunges forward. His metallic claws crash against Seo's sword. Seo barely succeeds in blocking the attack. The impact is so powerful that his arms nearly collapse beneath the force. Internally, Seo is completely terrified. He desperately wonders when his supposed S-rank status window is finally going to awaken. Before he can recover, the inventor slips beneath the greatsword with astonishing speed. In one fluid movement, he launches a precise counterattack. A violent wave of crimson lightning crashes into Seo. The unbearable pain forces him to release the greatsword as he screams in agony. The attack sends him flying across the battlefield. He crashes heavily onto the ground and spits out blood. Every part of his body burns with pain. For the first time, Seo truly believes that he's about to die. The inventor walks toward him, grabs him by the throat, and lifts him into the air. Excitement fills the villain's laughter. He says that he has discovered an unexpected prize and another loophole within the system. As he studies Seo more closely, something about the young man's appearance catches his attention. The villain suddenly freezes. His expression changes completely. A moment later, he erupts into delighted laughter. He finally understands what makes Seo different from everyone else. Without wasting another second, the inventor leaps onto his flying platform while continuing to hold Seo by the throat. He announces that they must return to his laboratory immediately. The villain excitedly says that he cannot wait to dissect such a fascinating specimen. Barely able to breathe, Seo refuses to surrender. He internally declares that there is no chance he will allow himself to become the villain's laboratory animal. Gathering every remaining fragment of strength in his body, Seo drives a powerful kick into the inventor's chest. The unexpected strike forces the villain to loosen his grip. Seo breaks free. However, instead of landing safely, he falls directly from the flying platform. As he plummets toward the ground, countless memories and thoughts rush through his mind. He remembers how excited he felt upon realizing that he had been reincarnated as the protagonist. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. Now, it has transformed into a complete nightmare. The burning world tree draws closer with every passing second. Terror entirely consumes him. Seo slowly closes his eyes. He quietly accepts that his brief life in this fantasy world is about to reach its end. Then, something impossible happens. A distorted system interface suddenly appears around him. Countless error messages flash before his eyes as mysterious green energy begins surrounding his body. Seo slowly opens his eyes again. Instead of continuing to fall, he discovers that he is floating. The world around him has completely changed. He now stands inside an endless white spiritual realm filled with countless glowing green particles drifting silently through the air. His eyes shine with brilliant golden light. Confused, Seo raises his hands and notices the same mysterious green energy radiating from his entire body. At that moment, a beautiful translucent spirit quietly appears behind him. It resembles an elegant elven being deeply connected to the world tree. Long, flowing robes surround its graceful figure while ancient luminous runes hover around it. The spirit gazes at Seo with a peaceful smile. It then gently reaches forward and offers him a small orb made from pure green light. Seo slowly extends his hand. The glowing orb settles into his palm. The instant he touches it, Seo feels an overwhelming connection to the sacred world tree. Warm spiritual energy flows through every part of his body. Then, in an instant, the radiant orb transforms into a magnificent golden bow overflowing with the untamed power of nature. A colossal eruption of green light engulfs the entire spiritual realm. The next moment, Seo's consciousness is dragged back into reality. Back at the festival, the inventor stares in complete disbelief. He curses in shock because everything occurring before him should be impossible. High above the battlefield, Seo floats in midair while surrounded by a towering pillar of radiant light. Realizing that he is resonating with the world tree itself, Seo gracefully descends toward the ground as a powerful wave of spiritual energy erupts around him. The sight leaves the inventor speechless. Seo grips the legendary bow tightly while its emerald glow grows stronger with every passing second. Determination hardens his expression. Slowly, he pulls back the bowstring and aims directly at the hovering villain. His eyes shine with brilliant green light as all of his concentration focuses on a single target. For the first time, cold sweat begins running down the inventor's face. The moment he recognizes the ancient relic and the elven mark, he understands exactly what they represent. However, rather than panicking, a crazed smile spreads across his face. His many years of research had been correct. Seo forms an enormous arrow made entirely from pure spiritual energy. He draws the bowstring back as far as possible. Watching the unbelievable sight, the inventor can no longer contain his excitement. His voice trembles with obsession as he declares that Seo is the one person who has finally surpassed the system itself. The next instant, Seo releases the arrow. The brilliant green projectile tears through the sky toward the inventor. The villain's expression changes immediately. He curses in shock just before the arrow strikes him directly. The inventor screams in agony as the overwhelming force tears through his advanced equipment. More importantly, the arrow hits the status disruptor with flawless precision. The device shatters into countless fragments. A massive explosion of emerald energy erupts beside the world tree, covering the entire festival in dazzling green light. Lying on the stone pavement, Choi Ji-hoon slowly opens his eyes with the final trace of strength remaining in his body. Looking toward the sky, he sees Seo floating beside the colossal world tree. Bathed in golden radiance and holding the legendary bow, Seo appears almost unreal. That unforgettable image burns itself into Ji-hoon's memory as his vision begins fading once again. Unable to remain conscious any longer, Ji-hoon closes his eyes and passes out. Meanwhile, Seo slowly descends toward the ground. As he lands, the legendary bow dissolves into countless glowing particles. The spiritual energy surrounding his body gradually disappears. The moment his feet touch the ground, exhaustion crashes over him all at once. Every trace of strength leaves his body. After pouring everything into that single attack, Seo finally loses consciousness and collapses onto his back. With the inventor defeated, the crimson energy covering the festival fades away. The world tree gradually returns to its peaceful state beneath the daylight. Moments later, the barriers surrounding the area finally collapse. Security forces and emergency responders immediately rush into the festival grounds to rescue the survivors. Medical teams are quickly summoned after officials confirm that several high-ranking guild hunters have suffered severe injuries. Nearby, a suited assistant desperately warns his superior that the area remains extremely dangerous. However, his warning is completely ignored. A young blonde woman carrying a wooden bow races past everyone without slowing down. She already knows that an attack this vicious could only have been carried out by the ruthless inventor. Tears begin gathering in her eyes. Silently, she swears that she will kill that merciless bastard with her own hands. However, the moment she reaches the colossal roots of the world tree, she abruptly stops. Something unusual catches her attention. Tiny streams of glowing green magic drift gently through the air around the gigantic trunk. She stares at the mysterious light in utter disbelief. Then she notices someone lying beneath the tree. It is Seo. He is unconscious, resting flat on his back while soft green particles cover his chest like a delicate cloak. The blonde woman slowly approaches him. A flawless circle of luminous leaves surrounds Seo in the center of the plaza. Completely unaware of the chaos around him, he sleeps peacefully. Deep within his unconscious mind, the golden energy of the world tree continues quietly repairing his injuries. Blue system notifications begin appearing one after another. The system announces that a failure has been detected before activating an emergency recovery protocol. A short while later, Seo slowly opens his eyes. A faint groan escapes him as his consciousness finally returns. He finds himself lying comfortably in a hospital bed while wearing a patient's gown. A sharp headache strikes him almost immediately. Holding his forehead, Seo carefully sits upright and attempts to organize his thoughts. Looking around the room, he notices medical devices and heart monitors positioned around his bed. Confused, he realizes that he is inside a hospital. Seo touches his own face. For a brief moment, he wonders whether everything that occurred during the World Tree Festival was merely some insane dream. However, the memories remain perfectly clear. He remembers meeting the mysterious spirit inside that vast white dimension. He remembers being given an incredible power. Most importantly, he remembers using the magnificent golden bow to defeat the inventor. Seo grabs his head in frustration and wonders what the hell happened. Something is clearly wrong. The story has changed. Instead of awakening the famous S-rank status window possessed by the original protagonist, all Seo clearly remembers is the system repeatedly reporting a critical error. While he is still trying to understand the situation, a woman's voice suddenly comes from the doorway. She remarks that he has finally awakened. The unexpected voice startles Seo, causing him to quickly turn toward the entrance. The instant he sees the visitor, his eyes widen. Standing in the doorway is none other than Shinjia, a wealthy young woman with beautiful golden hair and striking green eyes. She is famous for being among the most beautiful and talented people in the entire country. Without thinking, Seo blurts out her name. Shinjia looks surprised and asks how he knows who she is. Seo immediately panics. Naturally, he knows her. She is the heiress of the nation's largest corporate conglomerate and one of the strongest young warriors of her generation. In the original novel, Shinjia was a genius who excelled in both combat training and academics. She entered the academy as the highest-ranking student in her class. Because of her pride, she could never accept that the protagonist had been born with such an outrageously powerful S-ranked ability. That competitive relationship eventually caused her to become both his greatest rival and the main heroine of the story. Remembering all of this, Seo cannot understand why such an important person is standing inside his hospital room. Shinjia calmly walks toward him. She says that she expected him to recognize her immediately. Then, to Seo's complete astonishment, she drops onto one knee before him. Seo freezes completely. His jaw nearly falls open. He cannot understand what the hell is happening. Why would someone like her treat him with such extraordinary respect? With an entirely serious expression, Shinjia lowers her head. She says that it is an honor to finally meet the elven ancestor. Seo's mind goes blank. The title sounds strangely familiar. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly remembers an ancient piece of lore from the original novel. Approximately 10,000 years ago, legendary races such as dwarves, dragons, and vampires fought endless battles merely to survive. During that ancient era, the elves eventually settled in Korea and established their civilization around the sacred world tree. Seo remembers every detail of that history. However, there is one thing he cannot understand at all. He wonders why the hell Shinjia is calling him the ancestor of the elves. Before he can ask another question, Shinjia quietly moves closer. She gently places one hand on his shoulder. Seo instinctively stiffens. He has no idea what she intends to do. Looking directly at his left shoulder, Shinjia calmly explains that there is something unusual on his body. Seo quickly turns his head to look. The instant he sees his shoulder, his heart nearly stops. A radiant green crest has appeared across his skin. The magical symbol shines with intense emerald light. Seo stares at it in disbelief. He recognizes the mark immediately. It is the authentic royal crest belonging to the elven bloodline. His breathing becomes uneven. He cannot understand why something like that has appeared on his body. However, Shinjia calmly tells him not to panic. She assures him that the crest on his shoulder is a closely protected secret. Only she and a small number of people whom she trusts completely know that it exists. With a gentle smile, she tells Seo that he no longer has to conceal his true identity from her. Hearing that, Seo is utterly stunned. The entire story has gone completely off course. Embarrassed, he blushes as he realizes that Shinjia has made an enormous misunderstanding about who he really is. Before he can explain anything, Shinjia suddenly grabs both of his hands. The unexpected contact causes Seo to jump. Now he feels even more uncomfortable. Looking at him with shining eyes, Shinjie directly asks whether he was the person who defeated the inventor during the World Tree Festival attack. She explains that a legendary guardian awakened from within the World Tree and used the power of the elves to save everyone from the disaster. Shinjie also reveals that she searched through her family's entire corporate database for information about him. However, she discovered absolutely nothing. It is almost as though Seo appeared in the world from nowhere. Seo desperately attempts to pull his hands free. He nervously insists that he is not an elf and definitely not some legendary savior. Shinjie completely ignores his denial. Instead, she turns around and walks towards something she brought into the room. A moment later, she returns carrying an old wooden box covered in intricate carvings. Holding it before Seo, she gives him a doubtful look. She asks whether he is seriously claiming that he is not an elf. Then she slowly opens the box. Inside rests a beautiful golden amulet with a radiant green gemstone embedded at its center. Shinjie explains that it is an ancient family relic known as the Forest Calm Seal. She then asks Seo to try holding it. Seo hesitates briefly. Then an idea enters his mind. Perhaps this is the perfect opportunity to prove that Shinjie is completely mistaken. A confident grin spreads across his face. He reasons that if nothing happens, the entire misunderstanding will finally end. Seo casually reaches forward and picks up the amulet. He tells Shinjie to watch carefully because absolutely nothing is going to happen. The instant his fingers touch the relic, the entire amulet erupts with intense emerald light. Seo instinctively curses in shock. He has no idea why the relic is responding to him. Standing nearby, Shinjie watches with complete amazement. At the same time, Seo feels an enormous wave of spiritual energy pouring directly into his chest. None of it makes any sense. While staring at the glowing relic in his hand, Seo suddenly recognizes a familiar sensation. That gentle warmth is something he has experienced before. Then the realization strikes him. It is exactly the same feeling he experienced shortly before losing consciousness at the festival. Shinjie suddenly points toward his shoulder and draws his attention to the crest. Seo immediately looks down. The royal elven mark is glowing just as brightly as the amulet. Excitement fills Shinjie's eyes. She praises Seo's extraordinary power. Meanwhile, Seo is panicking internally. Nothing like this ever occurred in the original novel. As he watches the relic continue to shine, he cannot understand what the hell is happening to his body. Somehow, despite not possessing a status window, he has activated an ancient elven artifact. Such a thing should not be possible. At the same time, another issue enters his mind. Shinjie has a deeply personal connection to the inventor. The villain is the same man responsible for taking her mother away in the past. According to the original story, Shinjie was not supposed to discover who defeated him until much later. However, everything has already changed. At this point, the plot has spiraled completely out of control. After considering his options for a moment, Seo makes his decision. Since the situation has already gone this far, he might as well fully commit to the misunderstanding. His expression suddenly becomes serious. Looking directly into Shinjie's eyes, he speaks with a calm but commanding voice. He orders her never to reveal anything that happened inside the room. Seo tightens his grip around the glowing amulet. Then he puts on the most convincing expression he can manage. He confirms that he is indeed the elven ancestor. Without hesitation, Seo continues inventing the story. He claims that the spirit of Shinjie's mother awakened him from his long slumber inside the Sacred World Tree so that he could defeat the inventor. The explanation immediately causes tears to gather in Shinjie's eyes. Seo keeps the performance going. He tells her that assuming a human form consumed nearly all of his remaining strength. Then, after pausing briefly, he awkwardly clears his throat. He asks whether she has anything available for him to eat. Shinjie smiles brightly. She respectfully asks the ancestor to wait for only a moment and promises to have food prepared immediately. Unable to hide her excitement, she quickly rushes from the hospital room. Watching the door close behind her, Seo finally releases a long breath of relief. He cannot believe that she accepted every single word without hesitation. Now alone in the room, Seo cannot help feeling amazed. One enormous misunderstanding has been enough to make the country's most powerful heiress treat him with unbelievable reverence. At that moment, a strange tingling sensation begins spreading through his fingertips. Seo immediately notices that something feels wrong. The next second, a sudden burst of energy forces the amulet from his hand. It lands on the bed in front of him, leaving him completely bewildered. Seo stares at the artifact, unable to understand why it suddenly rejected him. Looking down at his hands, he wonders whether his body is simply incapable of controlling such immense power yet. Then he notices something unusual. The veins across his hand continue glowing with a faint green light. The sight instantly reminds him of the spiritual elf he encountered within the mysterious white dimension. Seo concentrates on the energy flowing through his palm. Then a possibility enters his mind. He truly did use elven magic. Perhaps, instead of awakening an ordinary status window, he obtained a completely different hidden ability. Curious, Seo pulls down the collar of his hospital gown and examines the luminous crest on his shoulder. He begins wondering whether he might now be capable of using the powers belonging to other races as well. Before he can consider the possibility any further, the door opens. Shinjia returns to the room while pushing a cart loaded with food. With an excited smile, she asks whether the ancestor was forced to wait very long. She immediately bows apologetically and assures him that the meal will be prepared in only a moment. Seo feels incredibly awkward seeing someone as important as her behaving so respectfully toward him. As Shinjia begins arranging everything on the table, she politely asks for his permission before touching anything near him. Watching her, Seo cannot stop thinking about how completely different their relationship has already become compared to the original story. Shinjia leans forward to place the dishes on the table. She is standing far too close. Seo instantly becomes nervous. Completely unaware of his reaction, Shinjia explains that the soup was personally prepared by the head chef of the Superhuman Academy. She says that she sincerely hopes it satisfies his tastes. The delicious aroma immediately causes Seo's stomach to growl. He reaches toward the bowl but suddenly freezes. His eyes widen. Seo asks whether she just said that the food came from the Superhuman Academy. Shinjia simply smiles and nods. Seo stares at her in complete disbelief. Without adding anything else, Jia quietly steps aside while Seo immediately begins eating. As he enjoys the meal, she walks toward the window and pulls the curtains open, allowing warm sunlight to flood the room. Seo continues eating as he looks outside. With a gentle smile, Jia officially welcomes him and gestures toward the enormous campus visible beyond the glass. She tells him that he has arrived at the Superhuman Academy. Jia explains that the hospital where he is recovering is located within the academy grounds and equipped with the finest medical facilities supplied by the Shinhwa group. A faint smile appears on Seo's face. Perhaps the situation is not so terrible after all. Being inside the academy may actually make it much easier for him to remain close to the original storyline. Completely forgetting his manners, Seo lifts the bowl and drinks the remaining soup in one long gulp. Jia watches him with an impressed expression. Concerned about his condition, she asks whether he already feels strong enough to walk around. Seo assures her that he feels much better thanks to her care. Then his expression suddenly becomes serious. He steps slightly closer and tells her that he needs to ask one important favor. The scene shifts to a breathtaking aerial view of the entire Superhuman Academy. Across the campus, students are already spreading rumors. Two female students excitedly discuss the news that the Shinhwa group's heiress will be enrolling that year. As Jia walks across the grounds, countless students quietly admire her beauty. However, it does not take long before everyone's attention shifts toward the incredibly handsome young man walking beside her. The blue-haired girl suddenly points toward Seo and asks whether he is the same person they saw earlier. Not far away, Choi Ji-hoon silently watches Seo pass by. His gaze remains fixed on him as he wonders who the mysterious young man truly is. Meanwhile, Seo simply continues walking beside Jaya. Maintaining a calm expression, he wears a faint and enigmatic smile while the attention of the entire academy follows him. As they approach the academy's enormous entrance, Seo quietly tells himself that everything is finally beginning for real. High above the entrance, a small girl wearing a ridiculous-looking hat looks down at the crowd with a cheerful smile. She remarks that everyone appears to have arrived. Without hesitation, she leaps directly from the rooftop. Instead of falling, she floats gracefully through the air while surrounded by a brilliant magical aura. She slowly descends above the gathered students before greeting them with an energetic smile. The young girl officially welcomes everyone to the Superhuman Academy's entrance ceremony. She enthusiastically encourages every student to give their absolute best and grow into exceptional superhumans in the future. Watching the ceremony begin, Seo focuses on the path ahead. His new life at the prestigious academy has officially started. Sometime later, the entrance examination begins. Inside the testing area, students suddenly start whispering while pointing towards someone. They urge each other to look as Seo confidently enters the area wearing his brand new academy uniform. Several girls immediately stare at him. They cannot stop talking about how unbelievably handsome he is. However, the mood changes almost immediately. Everyone suddenly notices his test results. One student curses in disbelief after seeing that every one of Seo's stats has received an F rank. Seo drops to his knees in utter shock. The painful reality finally settles in. Every one of his physical attributes is sitting at the lowest possible rank. Trying to regain his composure, Seo recalls how the academy's entrance examination is structured. The first stage measures each student's basic physical statistics. The second stage is a written examination designed to test academic knowledge. The final stage evaluates weapon aptitude and overall combat ability. Unfortunately, the first phase has already ended, and Seo has completely failed it. His physical strength receives an F rank. During the sprint test, he trips and crashes face first onto the ground, earning another F rank in agility. The results only become worse from there. Seo pours every bit of energy he possesses into the magical power assessment. The result is yet another F rank. Seo clenches his fists in frustration. The original protagonist dominated every category thanks to his absurdly powerful S-rank status window. Meanwhile, Seo is collecting nothing but miserable scores. The surrounding students immediately begin mocking him. One of them laughs and claims that even his grandmother could defeat someone that weak. Inside his mind, Seo completely loses control. He curses as he realizes that his entire plan to become the top-ranked student is already falling apart. At that moment, he suddenly senses an overwhelming surge of magical energy nearby. Turning his head, he sees Shinjia releasing an astonishing amount of spiritual power. The sheer pressure causes the entire room to light up. The examiner calmly records the result on a tablet. He announces that her magical power has reached B rank. The entire room immediately falls silent. Every student stares at her in disbelief. A freshman possessing B-rank magical power is already comparable to some of the academy's instructors. One young man thinks about approaching and introducing himself. His friend immediately stops him and explains that she is the Shinhwa group's heiress and far beyond his reach. While everyone continues talking, Shinja suddenly turns toward Seo. She gives him a warm smile before gently waving at him from across the room. Every nearby student looks completely confused. Seo immediately panics. Judging by her expression, it almost seems as though she is waiting for him to praise her. A few students approach Seo with mocking grins. One asks whether something is happening between him and the Shinhwa heiress. Another laughs and suggests that she is probably mocking his pathetic scores. He then demands to know how someone as weak as Seo was accepted into the academy at all. Before anyone can continue laughing, their voices abruptly stop. Shinjia begins walking directly toward them. One of the boys awkwardly extends his hand. Trying to conceal his embarrassment, he congratulates her on receiving a B-rank result in the magical power test. Shinjia does not even glance at his hand. Instead, she fixes him with an icy stare. Her voice becomes completely cold as she asks why he is attempting to touch her with such a filthy hand. The boy instantly freezes beneath the overwhelming pressure radiating from her. Watching the scene unfold, Seo immediately recognizes that terrifying side of her personality. At the same time, he quietly releases a sigh of relief. At least she listened when he warned her not to call him ancestor in public. Otherwise, the situation would have become a complete disaster. The examiner calls for everyone's attention and announces that the basic statistics assessment has officially concluded. The students will now proceed to the second stage of the entrance examination. Everyone enters a classroom and prepares for the general knowledge written test. At the front of the room stands an elegant instructor with white hair. He explains that knowledge is just as essential as physical strength for anyone who wishes to use a superhuman's abilities properly. After wishing the students good luck, he instructs them to begin. A few candidates quietly complain under their breath, wondering why they must take such a boring written examination. Meanwhile, Seo begins feeling nervous. The original novel never explained what questions actually appeared on this test. Since he failed the physical assessment so badly, he knows this is his best opportunity to recover. Without wasting another second, Seo immediately begins answering the questions. However, after reading the first few pages, his eyes suddenly widen. He curses in disbelief. His pen begins racing across the paper at astonishing speed. He does not hesitate even once. Every answer comes to him naturally. Then Seo realizes why. He read the original novel repeatedly. He already knows nearly everything the examination is asking. For the first time that day, he realizes that he genuinely has a chance to take first place. Suddenly, the instructor slams one hand onto another student's desk. His cold voice echoes throughout the classroom. He announces that cheating and looking at another student's answers will never be tolerated. He declares that anyone who behaves in such a manner has no right to become a true superhuman. Without issuing another warning, he immediately disqualifies the student. The frightened boy desperately attempts to explain himself. However, Instructor Fabius has no interest in listening. With a simple movement of his hand, he casts magic that seals the student's mouth shut. The classroom instantly becomes silent. After apologizing for the interruption, Fabius orders everyone to continue with the examination. At that moment, Seo calmly raises his hand. He announces that he is finished. The instructor pauses and asks whether he is already done. Fabius walks towards Seo's desk with a suspicious expression. Considering Seo's disastrous physical results, he assumes that the young man probably rushed through the test without thinking. However, the moment he begins reading the answer sheet, he freezes. His expression slowly changes into complete disbelief. The entire classroom watches in confusion as the instructor silently stares at the paper. Then Fabius suddenly looks up and demands to know who Seo thinks he is. Seo instinctively swallows. He remembers exactly what kind of person Fabius is from the original novel. The instructor is strict, eccentric, and nearly impossible to deceive. Even so, Seo refuses to retreat. He confidently rises from his chair and looks Fabius directly in the eyes. He introduces himself as Kong Seo Yul and declares that one day he will become the greatest superhuman in the world. Seo asks Fabius to watch his growth from that moment onward. For several seconds, the classroom remains completely silent. Then a proud smile appears on Fabius's face. He praises Seo's determination. According to the instructor, the young man's confidence is even more impressive than his flawless answer sheet. Fabius tells Seo that he will be observing his progress very closely from now on. Seo quietly releases a breath of relief. At least this time, he managed to impress someone using intelligence rather than physical strength. He smiles to himself. Even without a status window, he will overcome every obstacle through knowledge. Not long afterward, a large crowd gathers around the Academy's bulletin board. The results of the theory examination have finally been posted. Everyone stares at the rankings in complete disbelief. The student in first place achieved a perfect score. He even surpassed Shinjia. Seo quietly smiles after seeing his name positioned at the very top of the list. At least one part of his plan succeeded exactly as intended. Now only one challenge remains: the final stage of the entrance examination. At that moment, the instructor responsible for the last test steps forward. A wave of sparkling blue magic flows from his hands. Moments later, an enormous armory filled with every imaginable kind of combat weapon materializes before the students. The candidates stare in amazement. An entire weapons vault has appeared from nothing. A young instructor wearing glasses and a beanie smirks at the crowd. He announces that the weapon aptitude test is officially beginning. The instructor explains that any student who did not bring a personal weapon may freely choose whatever they require from the Academy's arsenal. Seo quietly studies the countless weapons. In the original novel, the protagonist always fought with a one-handed sword. However, after everything that has happened, Seo begins wondering whether choosing a long-range magical bow might be a better path. Without warning, Shinjia quietly sneaks up behind him and whispers directly into his ear. The sudden voice causes Seo to jump. Completely flustered, he lowers his voice and quickly tells her not to address him that way. He warns her never to call him ancestor in front of everyone. He also asks her to stop appearing behind him without warning because she nearly frightened him to death. Jia simply smiles. She says that she already saw the theory examination results and congratulates him for taking first place. According to her, the outcome was exactly what she expected. She happily claims that he must have deliberately pretended to be weak during the physical tests in order to conceal his true strength. Seo can only release a tired sigh. He wishes that were actually true. Then Jia suddenly presents a beautiful bow to him. She politely asks him to use it during the weapon aptitude examination. The bow possesses elegant curves, a deep metallic shine, and an exceptionally refined design. The instant Seo sees it, his eyes widen. He recognizes it as the legendary Elysium bow. It is one of the rarest and most valuable bows in existence. Jia proudly explains that she prepared it specifically for him. She says that she hopes he will finally reveal a small portion of his true abilities, so the other students will stop looking down on him. Then she raises both fists and smiles excitedly. She assures him that he can succeed. Seo cannot stop himself from blushing again. With a grateful smile, he accepts the bow. He thanks her and expresses his appreciation for lending him such an incredible weapon. The instant his hand closes around it, something feels different. The bow feels unbelievably light in Seo's hands. An unexpected sense of familiarity washes over him, almost as though he has spent his entire life practicing with one. At that moment, a mysterious golden radiance suddenly appears behind him. Seo immediately feels a strange reaction coming from his right shoulder. Before he can determine what is happening, a serious voice interrupts his thoughts. Someone steps directly into his path. It is Choi Ji-hoon. Wearing a stern expression, he stares straight at Seo. Seo recognizes him immediately and quietly sighs, thinking that this bastard must want something from him as well. Ji-hoon moves even closer without taking his eyes off him. He asks why Seo continues hiding his true physical strength from everyone. Then he brings up the attack at the World Tree Festival. Without the slightest hesitation, Ji-hoon declares that Seo was the person who defeated the inventor. His voice carries absolute certainty as he says that he knows it was him. Seo immediately pretends to be confused and asks what Ji-hoon is talking about. Internally, however, he is completely panicking. He wonders whether Ji-hoon actually witnessed everything. Ji-hoon explains that he remembers every detail from that day. He clearly saw Seo pick up the black iron greatsword during the battle. More importantly, Seo swung the enormous weapon using only one hand. Ji-hoon points out that the sword normally requires at least A-rank strength merely to lift. He admits that he already found Seo suspicious after seeing him at the festival. However, watching someone whose physical attributes are all F-rank somehow accomplish such a feat only made him even more suspicious. Growing impatient, Ji-hoon steps closer. He tells Seo to stop playing games and demands to know what he is really hiding. Ji-hoon starts mentioning the bow Seo used during the battle. Before he can finish, a cold voice interrupts him. Shinjia suddenly steps between them. She glares directly at Ji-hoon and tells him to mind his own business. Ji-hoon frowns and asks what she just said. Jia does not back down. Instead, she coldly dismisses him as nothing more than a spoiled heir from the rival Suseong group. Seo watches nervously as the heirs of the country's two largest corporate families glare at each other. The tension between them becomes heavier with every passing second. Ji-hoon appears ready to accept the challenge. However, before anything can happen, his teammates quickly grab him and beg him not to start a fight. At the same time, Seo gently places one hand on Jia's shoulder. He calmly asks her to let the matter go before the situation becomes even worse. The confrontation finally ends when the examiner calls Ji-hoon's name. It is his turn to begin the weapon aptitude test. As Ji-hoon walks toward the arena, he gives Seo one final look. He warns Seo that he will continue watching him closely. After he leaves, Jia quietly complains about how unbearable he is. Seo responds with an awkward laugh. Internally, however, his thoughts are far more serious. Ji-hoon is much sharper than he initially appeared. If Seo is not careful, that man will eventually uncover everything. A few moments later, the examiner watches with interest as Ji-hoon lifts the massive black iron greatsword and prepares for his evaluation. The instructor wearing glasses activates a high-tech combat robot. He tells Ji-hoon to show everyone what he is truly capable of. The machine immediately charges across the arena at full speed. Ji-hoon does not move an inch. He calmly waits for the perfect opportunity. The instant the robot launches its attack, Ji-hoon reacts. He smoothly avoids the strike before delivering a powerful kick that knocks the machine completely off balance. Without giving it time to recover, he channels all of his astonishing physical strength. Ji-hoon raises the enormous black iron greatsword high above his head and unleashes one overwhelming downward slash. The attack cuts the combat robot cleanly in half. The entire audience erupts in shock. Students begin talking excitedly about how absurdly talented the Susong group's heir is. Some can only sigh and complain that life is incredibly unfair. The instructor acknowledges that Ji-hoon's destructive power is impressive. However, he points out that Ji-hoon's actual swordsmanship has not yet fully caught up with the legendary weapon he is using. Ji-hoon clicks his tongue, clearly irritated by the criticism. Without wasting another moment, the examiner loudly calls for the next candidate. To Seo's surprise, his own name echoes across the arena. The examiner orders Kang Seo-yul to report to the combat field. Just before he steps forward, Shinjia quietly leans closer. She wishes her ancestor good luck. Seo nearly jumps. Keeping his voice low, he awkwardly thanks her before heading toward the testing area. Standing before a female examiner with a ponytail, Seo confirms his identity and prepares to begin the assessment. She checks the information displayed on her tablet before looking at him again. The examiner remarks that he is the famous student who somehow managed to receive nothing but F ranks. She gives him a stern lecture, explaining that no one earns results that terrible unless they never truly made an effort. Seo does not argue. He honestly admits that he never expected to perform so badly. As the lecture continues, his attention briefly drifts away. He remembers the strange reaction from his shoulder when he touched the bow earlier. The sensation felt exactly like the blessing he received from the world tree. Taking a slow breath, Seo steadies himself. If his theory is correct, that mysterious power should appear again. The examiner informs him that the target has been placed 1,000 meters away. She tells him to concentrate on landing at least one clean hit. However, the moment Seo raises the bow, her expression suddenly changes. Something about his posture is entirely different. Seo focuses completely on the distant target. He slowly draws back the string. A soft emerald light begins wrapping itself around his body. The instant he releases, the arrow shoots forward like a streak of green lightning, illuminating the entire testing hall. A second later, it strikes the exact center of the target, a perfect bullseye. Inside, Seo can barely contain his excitement. The world tree's blessing truly worked. The audience immediately erupts into applause. Meanwhile, the examiner remains completely frozen in disbelief. She cannot understand how someone with F-rank strength and mana managed to produce a shot like that. Seo calmly prepares another arrow. He fires again, another perfect hit. The audience becomes even more shocked. A few students, however, look confused. They can only see a single arrow lodged in the bullseye. Laughing, they assume Seo completely missed the second shot. One of them calls him a lucky bastard. Before anyone else can continue, Choi Ji-hoon steps forward with his arms crossed. He looks at them as though they are complete idiots. Ji-hoon asks whether they are blind. The entire group immediately falls silent. He tells them to stop staring only at the center and actually inspect the target properly. When they look more closely, everyone freezes. The second arrow did not miss. It split the first arrow directly down the middle. The shattered halves are lying beneath the target. The realization leaves every student speechless. Even the spectators watching from farther away cannot believe what they have witnessed. Off to the side, Shinjia smiles proudly as she watches her ancestor completely dominate the test. Meanwhile, Seo remains perfectly composed. He fires one arrow after another with flawless precision. Each glowing projectile slices through the air before splitting the arrow already lodged in the center. Again and again, every shot lands perfectly. By the end of the evaluation, Seo's accuracy has completely overwhelmed the weapon aptitude test. The entire arena erupts in disbelief. No one can understand how someone repeated such an impossible technique several times in succession. Suddenly, an examiner wearing an eye patch grabs Seo firmly by the shoulder. She calls his name with overwhelming excitement. Then, to everyone's surprise, she bows deeply. The examiner apologizes and says that she is genuinely sorry. The Academy's grading system only reaches A rank. As an instructor specializing in archery, she admits that watching his performance sent chills through her entire body. Her intense reaction leaves Seo feeling incredibly awkward. Even so, a faint smile appears on his face. Now, he is certain. The mysterious power sleeping within his shoulder has finally awakened. Perhaps he truly can survive in this world without ever obtaining the original S-rank status window. Around the arena, several girls quietly admire his unbelievable accuracy despite his terrible statistics. Others jokingly remark that even if his abilities are F rank, his face is undoubtedly S rank. Watching all the attention Seo receives from the other girls, Shinjia's expression gradually darkens. She is clearly not pleased. A short while later, the masked instructor officially announces that every entrance evaluation has concluded. The academy's admission ceremony finally comes to an end. Soon afterward, each new student receives the key to their assigned dormitory. Seo unlocks the door to his new room and immediately stops in his tracks. He's completely unprepared for what he sees inside. Seo steps into the assigned dormitory and freezes. The room is enormous. He cannot believe that the entire luxurious suite actually belongs to him. Compared to his old apartment, this place exists on an entirely different level. Curious, he walks into the bathroom. The moment he sees the large bathtub, he becomes even more impressed. After everything that happened that day, a long, hot bath sounds absolutely perfect. Seo removes his uniform jacket and smiles to himself. He thinks that he is going to sleep like a rock afterward. Meanwhile, elsewhere inside the academy, someone knocks on the wooden door leading to the president's office. The masked instructor quietly opens it and steps inside. He calmly explains that he has an important report to deliver. Behind the desk sits the academy's director. She greets him with a bright smile and asks whether the report concerns the newly admitted students. The instructor nods. He explains that the report focuses specifically on one cadet, Kang Seo. The director immediately remembers him. She asks whether he means the student who somehow received F ranks in every physical category. She also recalls that he placed first in a written examination and earned the highest possible evaluation during the weapon aptitude test. The instructor confirms every detail. The director begins wondering whether Seo is secretly concealing his actual abilities. With a playful smile, she jokes that perhaps he is merely pretending to be weak. The masked instructor disagrees. He explains that Seo's physical strength is genuinely F rank. While drawing the heavy bow, Seo's arms were visibly trembling from the strain. A faint blue glow appears in the instructor's left eye. He reminds the director that she already understands exactly how his special ability works. After hearing this, she asks for his personal opinion. She wants to know how someone with such terrible statistics could possess such extraordinary talent with a bow. The director theorizes that Seo may possess the Divine Archer trait, or perhaps even the incredibly rare Weapon Master trait. She quietly smiles to herself. A mischievous grin slowly spreads across her face. She finds the entire situation extremely interesting. Without hesitation, she orders the masked instructor to observe Seo closely. The instructor nods. He admits that this is precisely why he came to speak with her. From that moment forward, Kang Seo will officially be placed under the Academy's intensive monitoring program. Meanwhile, the person everyone is secretly investigating has absolutely no idea. Seo is already fast asleep, sprawled across the cold floor of his absurdly luxurious dormitory.